He smelled me out in front of the whole pack, his fated mate, and then he said it out loud. I reject you. 2 years later, he was on his knees in the snow, begging me to take it back. I let him kneel. The choosing happens once a year, under the first full moon of autumn, and every unmated wolf in the territory has to stand in the circle whether they want to or not. I did not want to. Stop fidgeting, Wren hissed, elbowing me. You look like you're about to bolt. I am about to bolt. You're a ward of the pack, Elian. Wards don't bolt. Wards stand in the back and get overlooked and go home and eat cold stew, which is the dream. That was the plan. Stand in the back. Get overlooked. I was very good at getting overlooked. It was, honestly, my one marketable skill. I had no bloodline anyone could name. My mother had come out of the northern woods 23 years ago, half dead and pregnant, and had died before she could tell anyone her surname. The pack took me in the way you take in a stray that follows you home, grudgingly, and forever after reminding you that they did. My scent was so faint the healers had actually tested me twice as a child to make sure I was an Omega at all. Weak, they wrote on my record. Negligible presentation. Unlikely to bond. I'd read it once, at 14, and then never looked at it again, because some things you only need to read once. The circle went quiet. Ronan Vale came down the steps of the great hall, and 300 wolves stopped breathing at the same time. The Alpha King, 28 years old, 6 years on the throne, and the only wolf in living memory to hold the Ironcrest territory without losing a single mile of it. He was, and I say this with the full weight of my hatred, retroactively applied, beautiful, the way a blade is beautiful. All that black hair, all that stillness, gray eyes, like weather coming in over water. He didn't want to be here either. You could see it. He'd been fielding the same question from his council for 6 years. When will the king take a mate? When will the king secure the line? He walked the circle every year. He'd never stopped once. He's not going to stop, Wren whispered. He never stops. Relax. He stopped. He stopped in front of me. Here's what nobody tells you about meeting your fated mate. They tell you about the scent. They tell you about the pull, the click, the way the world narrows to one point. They don't tell you it hurts. It went through my chest like a hook set in bone and pulled, and I heard myself make a sound I'd never made before, some small, ridiculous noise, and every wolf in that circle turned to look at me. Ronan Vale's pupils blew wide. His hands came up an inch, no more, like a man reaching for something in his sleep, and his voice came out wrecked and low. Mate, 300 wolves inhaled. And I stood there, 22 years old, in my one good shirt, with cold stew waiting at home, and thought, oh no. For about 4 seconds, it was the most beautiful thing that had ever happened to me. His whole face changed. Whatever that man was, underneath the crown that was, who looked at me, young, astonished, almost soft. Then he breathed in, properly, and I watched it happen. I watched him find nothing, because my scent was smoke off a candle already blown out, because I was the ward with a negligible presentation, because whatever the moon had written for us, it had written in ink so faint that even he had to squint. His jaw locked, and the softness went out of his face like someone had shuttered a window. Say something, I said. I don't know why. It just came out. He said something. I, Ronan Vale, Alpha of Ironcrest. Beside me, Wren whispered. No. Reject Elian Marsh as my fated mate. Silence. The kind of silence that has a floor to it, that you can fall through. I felt the bonds snap. I don't know how else to describe it. There was a thread being spun between us, brand new, and it went taut, and then it tore, and the tearing was in my chest, behind the sternum, in a place I had not known was mine to lose. My knees went. I hit the packed dirt of the circle on both of them, and I heard the sound my body made, and I heard, very distinctly, a woman near the front say, "Well, can you blame him?" I want to be honest, because this is the only place I'm going to be honest. It wasn't the rejection that broke me. It was that, he explained. He turned to his people. He didn't look at me. He never looked at me again that night, and he said, in the flat carrying voice kings use, "The moon errs. My mate carries no scent worth the name. He could not survive a heat cycle bonded to me. He could not carry an air. He could not stand at my side in a war. Could not. I will not chain this pack to a weakness. And then God, this is the part then, he added, almost gently, like he was doing me a kindness. It's mercy. Everyone nodded. That's what I remember most clearly. 300 people nodding. They gave me until dawn to leave. Nobody said it out loud. Nobody had to. A rejected mate can't stay in the territory the bond, even severed, even ash, still pulls. And a king with a broken thread in his chest doesn't need to walk past the reason for it at the market. Ren packed my bag while I sat on the floor of my room and stared at the wall. "You could appeal to the council," she said. Her hands were shaking. "There's precedent. There's Ren. There's precedent, Elian." He said it in front of 300 people. She stopped folding. "I'm not going to stand in another circle," I said, and ask him to say it again. I left an hour before sunrise. It was raining. Of course it was raining. The bond sickness starts fast. They don't tell you that either. By the time I reached the ridge road, my hands wouldn't close properly and my chest felt like someone was slowly, methodically pressing a thumb into a bruise that went all the way through. I got maybe 6 miles. Then my legs stopped negotiating, and I went down on the wet stones, and I could not get up, so I crawled. I want it written down plainly, because later people will tell it as though it were noble. It wasn't noble. It was mud and blood on my palms and my own weight fighting me, and at one point, a noise coming out of my throat that I have never made since. I crawled off Ironcrest land on my hands and knees. That's the last thing his territory ever got from me. I woke up on a table, not a bed. A table, scrubbed pine, with a lamp over it and the smell of boiled cloth, and an old man with a face like a dropped map looking down at me with something between annoyance and professional interest. "Rejection bond," he said. "Fresh, nasty one." I tried to speak. Nothing came. "Don't." He pressed 2 fingers under my jaw, counting. "You want the good news or the bad news?" I stared at him. "Fair. Bad news. Rejection kills about 1/3 of omegas in the first month. Your body thinks it's lost half its organs. It's going to spend the next few weeks trying to shut down out of grief. You'll want to let it." I closed my eyes. "Good news," he said, "is that I've been doing this 40 years, and I'm difficult about my patients." That was Bram. He saved my life roughly 9 times in the first year, and complained about it every single time, and never once asked me who had rejected me, which is, I think, the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me. Thorn Hollow wasn't a pack. That's the first thing I had to understand. It was a hollow between 2 ridges, 4 days' walk from any territory line, and it was where the wolves, who didn't fit anywhere else, ended up. Rogues, exiles, rejected mates, omegas who'd run from bad bondings, alphas who'd lost too many fights, everyone's shameful arithmetic. There were maybe 60 of us when I arrived. No king, no circle, No one to nod along while somebody explained why you were a weakness. The first month, I mostly lay in Bram's back room and shook. The second month, I got up and swept his floor, because I couldn't stand my own hands being empty. The third month, a girl came in with a crush injury to her forearm, and Bram was 2 ridges away, and there was nobody but me, and I looked at the bone coming through the skin, and my body did something very strange. It went calm. I set the bone. I don't know how I knew. I'd watched Bram maybe a dozen times, but my hands did it like they'd done it 1,000 times, steady all the way through. And the girl, Mira, 11 years old, and she never once cried, watched my face the entire time instead of her arm. "You're not scared," she said afterward. "I'm extremely scared. You don't smell scared." I laughed, and it startled me, because it was the first time I'd laughed since the circle. "I don't smell like anything," I said. She looked at me for a long moment with the flat, merciless clarity of 11-year-olds everywhere. "Yeah, you do," she said. "You smell like it's going to be okay." I thought about that for a long time, because it wasn't true. I had a healer's file that said, negligible presentation. I had a king who'd sniffed me and found nothing. But over the next year, I started noticing things. Fights in the hollow ended when I walked into the room. Not because I intervened. I never intervened. I'm not built for it. But because the temperature would drop out of them. Wolves in pain stopped thrashing when I put my hands on them. An alpha in a rut, 3 days gone and dangerous, sat down on the floor when I came in with water and cried and did not touch me. Bram watched all of it with his mouth in a line. "Huh," he said. That was it, just, huh. I didn't ask. I was very busy that year, not asking myself any questions I couldn't survive the answers to. Here's what I learned about the rejection bond, in the meantime, the hard way. It doesn't heal. It scars badly, and the scar aches when the weather turns, and sometimes at night I'd wake up with my hand pressed flat to my sternum like I could hold something in. But it doesn't only run one way. Bram told me that the winter of the first year, hunched over the fire with a cup of something medicinal and appalling. Rejection's a two-ended thing, he said. Fated bond's the only tie the moon makes herself. You cut it, you don't cut it clean, and you don't cut it once. It bleeds at both ends, forever. So he's worse off than you. I stared at him. He's a king. Bram made a sound like a laugh that had been left out in the rain. Boy, he said, who do you think the moon punishes? The one who was thrown away, or the one who did the throwing? I told myself I didn't care. I told myself that for 2 years, with real conviction, while a rumor came drifting down out of the north like ash from a fire you can't see. The Alpha King is sick. No, the Alpha King is fine. Obviously. Don't be absurd. The Alpha King has never been better. The Alpha King's wolf won't come when he calls. The Alpha King lost a border skirmish he should have won in his sleep. The Alpha King put his fist through a wall in council, and nobody's brave enough to ask why. Ren wrote to me twice a year, letters that took a month to arrive, and she never mentioned him, and that in itself told me everything. Until the letter that said, he's stopped shifting, Elian. It's been 4 months. An Alpha King who can't shift. Nobody says your name in front of him, but he says it. When he's asleep, I burned that letter. I want to be clear that I burned it immediately, without rereading it like a person with dignity. I burned it. And then I went out and split wood until my hands bled, and Bram came out and watched me for a while, and then said, when you're done being 24, there's Stu. I'm not being 24. You're splitting wood in the dark, in the rain, for a woodpile that has been full since October. I put the axe down. He's sick, I said. He He's sick, and it's Bram. It's my rejection that's... No, he said it very sharply, and I looked up, and his face was hard in a way I'd never seen. No, listen to me. He said the words. He chose. Whatever's eating him. He sat down at that table and ordered the meal himself. He turned back toward the house. Don't you dare go north to be the medicine, he said, over his shoulder. You are not medicine. You're a person. And people who go north to be medicine come back as something you have to bury. I didn't go north. For a long time years, I stayed exactly where I was, and I built something. And I want to be arrogant about it for one paragraph, because I've earned it. Thorn Hollow was 60 rogues in a ditch when I got there. By the time I was 25, it was 300 people. We had a proper infirmary. We had a school, badly, run by a former pack scribe with a stutter and infinite patience. We had a policy, my policy, the only one I ever insisted on, that nobody who arrived here was asked what they'd been thrown out for. And they came. God, they came. Omegas walking 100 miles with their teeth broken. Betas who'd lost their pack in a border war. Alphas who'd been declared unfit, which is a word that covers a great many sins, and it turns out an equal number of tragedies. They came, and someone had to look at them and say, stay. That turned out to be me. I was not particularly qualified. I just kept being the one in the room. Cassian Roth arrived in the 4th year, in a snowstorm, with a knife wound in his side, and 3 of his men dead behind him. He was, and I need you to understand the size of the problem here, the Alpha King of the Northmoor territory. Not a rogue, not an exile, the most powerful wolf on the continent after Ronan Vale, and arguably not after, and he was bleeding out on my infirmary floor with his cousin's blade still in him because his cousin had made a play for the throne and very nearly landed it. I did not know any of that when I started cutting his shirt off. Hold still. You, he said through his teeth, have no idea who I am. You're the one bleeding on my table, so I'd say I've got the essentials. He laughed. It cost him. Blood came up. Then he inhaled the way wolves do, the way they always do, cataloging you, and his whole face went strange. What are you? He said. Busy, I said, and put my hands on him. Cassian took 6 weeks to heal, which is roughly 5.5 weeks longer than he was emotionally prepared for. He recovered his throne in the spring. He did it with 40 men from Thornhollow men. I asked to go, which is a thing I've never entirely forgiven myself for, because 11 of them didn't come back. And when it was done, he came back down the ridge road with a wagon of grain, a signed writ of protection for the hollow, and a proposal. Not that kind. Not yet. An alliance, he said, standing in my infirmary in his good coat, looking absurd among the drying herbs. Thorn Hollow under Northmoor's shield. You keep your autonomy, you keep your no questions rule, I keep the vultures off your ridges. And what do you get? He smiled. He had a very good smile, which he knew. An honest answer to a question, he said, which is, who rejected you? I went completely still. I've been trying to work it out for 6 weeks, he said softly. You've got the scar. Every rejected mate has it. The wolves can smell it. It's like a cracked bell. And I keep thinking, what idiot, Cassian. No, genuinely. You held my heart in your hands, more or less literally, and my own wolf lay down for you. My wolf lay down. 16 years I've had that animal in my chest, and it has never once... He stopped, collected himself. Kings do that. They collect themselves. What idiot threw you away? I didn't answer. He watched me not answer, and something in him settled, and he said in a different voice entirely. "It's him, isn't it? Vale. How?" "Because he's dying," Cassian said, "and nobody knows why." I put down the jar I was holding very carefully, because my hands had decided to be a problem. "He hasn't shifted in 2 years," he said. "He's lost 40 pounds. Ironcrest has ceded 3 border valleys because their king cannot hold a war line for a full day anymore. The council has met twice about whether to declare him unfit." Unfit, that word again, doing its work. "And half the continent," Cassian said, "is watching a wolf who was the strongest of us come apart at the seams, and nobody can find a wound on him." He stepped closer, not touching. Cassian never touched me without permission. I'll say that for him, always. "But there's no wound," he said. "Is there? There's just a thread, and you're holding the other end." "I'm not holding anything," I said. He cut it. "That's not how it works, and you know it." "I know exactly how it works." My voice came out wrong. Loud. Ren would have been proud. "I know how it works, because I spent a month on a table wanting to die, and a year afterward learning how to hold a cup again. And he gets to be dying romantically while I'm here setting bones." I stopped. Cassian said nothing. He was, damn him, very good at saying nothing. "Don't," I said. "I didn't say anything." "You were about to." "I was about to say," he said, "that in 4 years I have watched you take in 300 people who had nowhere to go, and that you look at every single one of them and ask what they need." He picked up his gloves. "And I wonder," he said, "when the last time was that anybody asked you." I signed the alliance, for the hollow, for the grain, and the shield, and the writ. And if I lay awake that night with my hand pressed flat to the scar in my chest that was between me and the dark. The council summons came in the 5th year. Every pack sends delegates. It's held at Greymere, neutral ground, an ugly stone hall in an ugly valley. And Thorn Hollow had never been invited in its history, because Thorn Hollow was not a pack, it was a problem. And you do not invite problems to dinner. Cassian got us the seat. He did it by standing up in front of the assembled alphas of the continent and saying that the Northmore throne had been retaken with Thorn Hollow's blood, and that any wolf who wished to dispute Thorn Hollow's standing could dispute it with him personally, at their convenience, outside. Nobody disputed it. "You're coming," he told me afterward. "Absolutely not." "Elian, he'll be there." Cassian looked at me for a long moment. "Yes," he said, "he will." I went. Of course I went. 300 people needed a seat at that table, and I was the only one they'd let sit in it. And I have never in my life been able to let someone else carry a thing I could carry. It's my worst quality. I've made peace with it. Ren met me at the gates of Greymere and screamed and hit me twice, and then held on to me so hard I couldn't breathe, and cried into my shoulder for a full minute in front of a great many important people. "You look, Elian, you look old. You look like someone," she said fiercely. "You left here a ghost, and you came back looking like someone." I laughed. And over her shoulder, through the crowd, across the width of that ugly stone hall, I saw him. I want to describe this accurately. Ronan Vale was 31 years old, and he looked 10 years older than that. The black hair had gray in it at the temples at 31. He'd lost the weight Cassian had described, and what was left of him was all edge, all bone and jaw and hollow. His hands, resting on the table, had a fine tremor in them that he was clearly spending a tremendous amount of energy not acknowledging. He was still the most beautiful thing in the room. I hated that. I want that on the record. I have never resented anything as much as I resented the fact that my body, my stupid animal body, looked at that ruined man and said ours. He hadn't seen me yet. He was listening to a delegate, nodding, doing the job, and then the wind changed. Someone opened the far door, the air moved through the hall, and I watched Ronan Vale's head come up like a man's shot. He stood so fast his chair went over backward. 100 wolves turned. He didn't notice. He was looking at me, and his face was doing something I had spent 5 years telling myself I would never see, which was hoping. Elian, he said it out loud, in front of the Council of Packs, in a voice that cracked down the middle. I looked back at him, and I discovered, standing there in a borrowed coat, with my heart going like a bird in a jar, that I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do until I did it. What I did was turn to the delegate beside me and say, "I'm sorry, you were saying? The grain tariff?" The delegate, a thoroughly decent beta from the Ashfell Holdings, blinked at me. The tariff, yes. Go on, I said. I'm listening. And I sat down, and I did not look at the head of the table, and behind me 100 wolves watched the Alpha King of Ironcrest stand alone in the wreckage of his own chair, with his mouth open and nothing coming out. Ren told me afterward that he stood there for 11 seconds. I know exactly how long it was. I counted every one. He cornered me at dusk. I'd known he would. I had taken the long way back to the guest wing precisely so that when he did, it would be somewhere with a wall at my back and nobody around to watch, because I am not made of stone, and there was a non-zero chance I was going to say something I'd have to live with. He came around the corner and stopped 6 feet away, like a man approaching a horse. "You're alive," he said. "Astute. Elian." "It's Marsh," I said. "You lost the right to the other one in a circle in front of 300 people at some volume." He flinched. "I want to tell you, it wasn't satisfying. It was enormously satisfying, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise, and I think anyone who says they wouldn't have enjoyed it is lying. I've been looking for you," he said. "Have you?" "For 4 years. I've had men in every territory. I had the Northern Woods searched twice." "You had the Northern Woods searched?" I tilted my head. "And what were you planning to do exactly if you'd found me?" He didn't answer. "No," I said. "Go on. I'm genuinely asking. What was the plan? Ride into wherever I was starving, in your good coat, and say what? Elian, Marsh. I was wrong, and there it was. It landed in the corridor between us, like a dropped plate. I looked at this man, this ruin of a man, with his shaking hands and his gray temples and his eyes doing that terrible hoping thing, and I felt the scar in my chest pull toward him like a compass needle. And I felt my own wolf, my quiet, useless, thin-scented wolf, whine. And I said, "I know." He took a step forward. "Don't," I said, and he stopped, like I'd put a blade against his throat. "You don't get to move toward me. Not for that. Not for a sentence. Then what do I—" "Nothing." My voice was very steady. I was proud of that later. You don't get to do anything. That's the point. That's what rejection is, Ronan. You went first. You went first, in public, at volume, and you took the choice off the table and you put it in the ground. I stepped around him. "Enjoy the council," I said. "The tariff talks are Thursday." I made it to my room before my legs stopped working. I sat on the floor with my back to the door for about an hour, breathing wrong, with my fist against my sternum. And on the other side of the door, I know this because Ren found him there, at midnight. Ronan Vale sat with his back against the same wood on the floor of a guest corridor. in front of anyone who cared to walk past, and did not move until dawn. He didn't knock. He didn't speak. He just sat there, on the other side of 6 inches of oak, so close I could feel the bond humming through the wood like a struck wire. The king of Ironcrest, on the floor, all night. Rand said he looked up when she came and asked her one question. Is he happy? She said she told him the truth. She said she told him, he's loved, Ronan, which is more than you managed. Thursday, the tariff talks. Friday, the border arbitration. Saturday, the thing that broke it all open. Saturday was the formal dinner. 300 wolves in a hall built for 200. All the delegates, all the kings, the whole grinding machinery of continental politics wearing its good clothes. Cassian offered me his arm at the door. I took it. I would like to say I did that for political reasons. Thornhollow's standing, Northmore's shield, the optics of an alliance. I did it because Ronan Vale was standing 30 feet away and I wanted him to see. I'm not proud of it. I'm not sorry about it either. Those are different things, and I've had a long time to think about both. Cassian, to his enormous credit, knew exactly what he was being used for and did it magnificently. He pulled up my chair. He leaned in to hear me over the noise. He laughed at something I said that was not objectively funny, and he laughed with his head thrown back like it was the best thing he'd heard in a year. And at the head of the table, Ronan Vale's glass cracked in his hand. Not shattered, cracked. One clean line right through the crystal, and the wine went down over his knuckles like something worse, and he did not look away from us for one single second. The Ironcrest delegates went very quiet. Somebody, somewhere, said, "Christ," under their breath. "He's going to break something," Cassian murmured, not moving his lips. "He already has." "Elian," he said it gently, "I'll take him if it comes to it. I want you to know that. I'm not afraid of him, and I'd probably win in the state he's in. I know. But if I do it," he said, "you have to actually want it, not just want him to watch." I put down my fork. That's the thing about Cassian Roth. He was the most dangerous man in that hall, and he handled me like glass, and he never once let me lie to myself in his company. It's the reason we stayed friends for the rest of my life. It's also the reason we were never anything else. "That's not fair," I said. "No," he agreed. "But I'm right." Then Talia Vane stood up. Ronan's second, his cousin by marriage, his chief advisor, the most capable political mind in Ironcrest, and this is important, an Omega, a strong one, the kind whose scent fills a room before she does. Everyone had assumed she'd be his consort for years. The pack liked it. The council liked it. She'd been running his territory for 2 years while he came apart, and she'd done it well. She raised her glass and she smiled at me across the length of that table, and it was the warmest, kindest, most sympathetic smile I have ever received. "To the healer of Thornhollow," she said, "who took in the wolves that no pack would keep." Applause. "It's a remarkable thing," she went on, "to make a home out of the discarded." More applause. "After all," she said, "he knows better than anyone what it is to be one." The hall went quiet in that specific, delicious way that halls go quiet when someone has been elegantly disemboweled at dinner. 300 faces turned to me. I looked at Talia Vane, and Talia Vane looked back with her lovely warm smile, and I thought, "Ah, there you are." I stood up. "To the discarded," I said, and raised my own glass. "Long may we inconvenience you." There was a pause. Then, from somewhere in the middle of the room, a rogue delegate laughed a big, ugly bark of a laugh, and someone else picked it up, and then half the hall was laughing and hammering the tables because half the hull, it turns out, is always the discarded, in one way or another. I drank. Talia's smile didn't move a millimeter, but her eyes went flat. And at the head of the table, Ronan Vale was staring at me like a man watching the sun come up over a country he'd been exiled from. He caught me on the terrace afterward. Of course he did. You didn't have to do that, he said. Do what? Take that from her. In front of, his hand moved, vaguely, at the whole hall, the whole continent. You could have let me answer it. I laughed out loud. Let you, I said. Ronan, what do you think I've been doing for 5 years? I know. No, you don't, and that's fine. But do not stand out here and imagine you were ever permitted to answer for me. He was quiet. The wind came up the valley, cold, smelling of stone and pine, and the bond ached in my chest like a knuckle in an old break. Your hands are shaking, I said. Yes. When did you last shift? He looked out at the dark. 2 years, 4 months, he said. I closed my eyes. Because I'm a healer. Because I am constitutionally incapable of hearing that and not doing the arithmetic. An alpha who hasn't shifted in 28 months is an alpha whose wolf is starving in a locked room. And the locked room is him. And eventually, one of them dies and takes the other with it. You need to let it out, I said. I can't. Ronan, I can't. He turned, and his voice broke apart in the middle. It won't come. I call it, and it turns its back on me. Alien. My own wolf will not look at me. He held up his shaking hands and stared at them like they belonged to a stranger. It knows what I did, he said. It was there. It was screaming the whole time, and I did it anyway. And now it will not speak to me. Then it's smarter than you, I said. He made a sound. Not quite a laugh. Yes. We stood there for a while. They're going to declare me unfit, he said, conversationally, to the dark. The council. 2 votes short. Last count. Talia's holding it together, but the moment I fail a war line, that's the end of it. 6 years of holding Ironcrest, and I'll go out like a lame horse. And what would you like me to do about it? He turned his head. Nothing, he said. God, Eliane. Nothing. I didn't come out here to ask you for anything. I've spent 5 years learning exactly what I'm owed, and it's nothing. And I'd like you to know that I've learned it. He looked back out at the valley. I just wanted to stand near you, he said. For a minute, while you'd let me. I let him. For about a minute. Then I went inside, and I closed the door, and I stood in the dark of the corridor with my forehead against a cold wall, and I said, out loud, to absolutely nobody, don't, because I could feel it starting. 5 years. 5 years of building something out of nothing, out of a ditch, out of 60 rogues and a scrubbed pine table. 5 years of not being the boy on his hands and knees in the rain on the ridge road. And one man says, I just wanted to stand near you, and the whole thing goes wobbling. Don't you dare, I told myself. I did, obviously, but not yet. Here is what happened at Graymere on the last day of the council, and it changed everything, and I've gone over it 1,000 times. The Ashfell delegation brought a child. Not a delegate, a patient. A boy of about 9, carried in on a stretcher, because Ashfell had heard that the healer of Thornhollow was at the council, and Ashfell had run out of ideas. Wolfsbane poisoning. Deliberate some border feud, some grudge that had gone downhill fast. 3 weeks in, and past the point where anyone could do anything, and his father carried him into that ugly stone hall in front of the assembled kings of the continent, and put him down on the flagstones, and said, please. Just that, please. I knelt down beside him. The boy was blue around the mouth. pulse like a moth. He'd stopped being conscious 2 days before, and he was in that thin place where the body has agreed to the terms and is just waiting for the paperwork. I put my hands on his chest, and I want to tell you exactly what happened next, because there were 300 witnesses, and every one of them tells it differently, and I was the only one on the inside. It was like leaning against a door you thought was locked. Something in me, some door I had been leaning on my entire life, some door I had been told, in writing, at the age of 14, did not open. Swung, the scent came off me in a wave. I couldn't smell it. I have never once been able to smell it. That's the joke. That's the whole joke of my life. But I watched 300 wolves go to their knees. All of them. Every wolf in that hall. Kings, war leaders, alphas who had killed men with their hands, down, like grass under wind. Later, they tried to describe it to me. Cassian said it was like the moment before a storm breaks, that pressure, that unbearable rightness, when the whole sky agrees to something. Ren said it smelled like the house she grew up in. Bram, when I got home and told him, went white and put down his cup and said, "Oh, you stupid boy," and would not explain. And the child on the flagstones opened his eyes. Not healed, not saved. I want to be accurate. I did not perform a miracle. He took another 8 days and a great deal of very unglamorous medicine to actually live. But he opened his eyes in a hall full of kneeling wolves and said, "Da?" And his father made a sound I have heard exactly twice in my life and hope never to hear again. I looked up. Ronan Vale was on his knees, 8 feet away, with tears running down his face, and he was shaking the whole body the way a horse shakes, and his eyes had gone entirely gold. Not the gray, gold, alpha gold, full shift light, the wolf right at the surface after 28 months in the dark. He was staring at me like a man who has been told, at the last possible moment, that the sentence was a mistake. "Alien," he said, and then he shifted. In the middle of the council hall, in front of the assembled delegations of the continent, without permission, without preamble, with a scream that started as a man's and ended as something else entirely. The black wolf of Ironcrest came apart out of the king's body like a thing being born, and it was starved. I could count its ribs through the fur, and it hit the flagstones and staggered and could not stand. It could not stand. 2 years of not eating, and it came out anyway, because I had opened a door in a stone hall, and the moment it smelled me, it clawed its way out of him like an animal out of a burning barn. It dragged itself across the floor toward me. 3 feet. 4. And then it collapsed with its head on my knee, and it cried. I don't know how else to say it. Wolves don't cry. Wolves make a noise, a specific noise, that you hear maybe once in your life if you're unlucky, and it is the sound of an animal that has been in pain for a very long time and has just been touched kindly. The hall was silent. 300 wolves on their knees, and a dying boy breathing, and the Alpha King of Ironcrest, in his true form, with his enormous scarred head in the lap of the Omega he had thrown away, making that sound. And I sat there, with my hands in the air, not touching him. I want to be very honest about this moment, because it is the hinge of my whole life. I wanted to touch him. I wanted it the way you want water. Every cell in my body was screaming, "Put your hands down. He's yours. He's been yours since you were 22. Put your hands down and forgive him, and let the world go back to the shape it was supposed to be." And I heard, very clearly, in my own memory, a voice saying, "Could not survive a heat cycle, could not carry an air, could not stand at my side in a war. It's mercy, And I thought about a boy crawling off Ironcrest land on his hands and knees in the rain. And I put my hands in my lap. "Get up," I said. The wolf didn't move. "Ronanvale," I said, and I heard my own voice do something I'd never heard it do. It came out with weight in it. It came out and it landed. And every wolf in that hall flinched. "Get up." He got up. He got up on 4 shaking legs, that starved black wolf, and he stood over me with his head down and his tail down and his eyes on the floor, submitting the Alpha King of Ironcrest, submitting in front of the entire continent. And I stood up, and I stepped around him, and I said, "The boy needs a bed and clean water. Somebody who isn't kneeling, please." And that, as it turned out, was the moment everything went to hell, because a hall full of the most powerful wolves alive had just been forced to their knees by an Omega with no bloodline, no pack, and a healer's file that said negligible presentation. And every single one of them wanted to know why. They kept me at Greymere for 9 days. Not a prison, technically. A guest, technically. With 4 guards outside the door, technically, for my protection. Cassian was incandescent. It's an outrage. It's politics. It's an outrage, Elian. They cannot hold you while a committee of ancient alphas argues about your lineage. They can, though. I was very calm. I'd found a strange calm somewhere around day 3, the way you do. They absolutely can. That's rather the theme of my life, if you've been following along. He stopped pacing. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be. Sit down. Tell me what they're actually saying, because the guards won't." What they were actually saying was this. There is a word in the old tongue. It doesn't have a good translation. The scholars render it as sovereign, which is misleading, or cradle, which is worse. It means the Omega line the moon speaks through. Every pack has the story. It's a nursery tale, the Omega, whose scent could stop a war, whose blood could pull a wolf back from death, whose presence made lesser wolves kneel. The line ran through the old Silver Crown pack in the north, and Silver Crown was burned to the foundation 80 years ago by an alliance of 4 packs who had decided, collectively, that no one should own a weapon like that. They killed everyone. That's the official history. Everyone. Every man, woman, and child of the Silver Crown line put to the sword in a single night, and the ground salted, and the name struck from the rolls. Except that 80 years is 3 generations, and a woman came out of the northern woods 23 years, 28 years, now ago, half dead and pregnant, and would not tell anyone her name. Bram told me the rest when they finally let him in on day 6. He came in and sat down, and he looked 10 years older than he had at Thornhollow, and he said, "I knew your mother." I put down the cup I was holding, very carefully, on a table, like a sensible person. "I was pack healer at Ironcrest 30 years ago," he said, "before I got tired of it. She came out of the woods in a winter that killed 40 of us, and I put her in a bed, and she was the strongest Omega I have ever touched in my life, and she was hiding it so hard it was killing her. Hiding it. Suppressants. Filthy ones. Old poison, the kind they used to give to slaves. Boy, the kind that shuts the scent off at the root and takes about 20 years off you doing it." His hands were shaking. She'd been on them since she was a girl. Somebody put her on them to keep her alive, and she kept herself on them. And it killed her at 26, with you 3 days old. "And me," I said. My voice came out from a long way off. "And me. You gave me. She gave you." He was crying, I realized, in a furious, unwilling, entirely Bram way. Half dose. She made me swear it. 3 days old, and she made me put her son on the same poison that was killing her, and she said, he stopped. Say it, I said. She said, they will burn him too if he shines. I sat down on the floor. Not gracefully. Just the floor came up, and I went to meet it. How long? I said. How long did you give it to me? Until you were 11. 11? And then I got out, and I left, and I went to the hollow, and I let it wash out of you. But boy, 11 years. He wiped his face with the heel of his hand. 11 years on that stuff during presentation. It doesn't wear off. It builds a wall. You've spent your whole life on the wrong side of a wall I built, and I have been standing in that hollow for 14 years waiting for you to come find me, and I never once had the courage to tell you, you saved my life. I muzzled you. You saved my life, I said, and I was rejected in front of 300 people for being weak. And I was never weak, and my mother died to make me look weak, and Bram, I couldn't finish it. He crossed the room, and he sat down on the floor beside me, an 80-year-old man, cursing the entire way down, and we sat there together for a while. Here's what I did with that information. The council convened on the 9th day to determine my status. 60 alphas in a semicircle, the 4 kings at the center, and 1 chair in the middle of the floor for me. I did not sit in it. I'm told, I said, that you've been debating what I am. Somebody started to speak. I kept going. I'll save you the trouble. I'm the son of a woman who walked out of the ashes of Silver Crown with poison in her veins because your grandfathers decided her family was too dangerous to be permitted to exist. Silence. And she poisoned me too, I said, so that you wouldn't have to be afraid of me. She spent her life making me small enough for you. I looked at them, all of them, one at a time. I'd like you to understand, I said, that it worked. So here is where we are. You want to know if I'm the Silver Crown heir. So do I. There's no one left alive who can prove it, because you killed them. You want to know if I'm dangerous. Yes, demonstrably. You were all on your knees 9 days ago, and I wasn't even trying. And you want to know what I intend to do about it. I let that sit. Nothing, I said. That got a reaction. I run a hollow full of people your packs threw out, I said, over the noise. I set bones, and I stitch wounds, and I bury the ones I can't save, and I have not had a full night's sleep in 5 years, and I do not want your thrones, your territories, your wars, or your hands on me. I want a writ of protection for Thornhollow, permanent, signed by all 4 kings. I want the record of the Silver Crown massacre entered into the rolls, in full, with the names of the packs who did it. And I want to go home. They gave me all 3. They gave it to me in about 40 minutes, which, if you know anything about the Council of Packs, is roughly the speed of light. And they gave it to me because 60 of the most powerful wolves on the continent had spent 9 days remembering what it felt like to be on their knees on a stone floor with no idea why. Fear is a very efficient legislature. Ronan Vale signed last. He came forward with a pen, and he did not look at me, and his hand was shaking so badly that the signature came out wrong, and he had to do it twice. And as he set the pen down, he said, so quietly that only I heard it, "You could have asked for anything." "Yes," I said. "Elian." His voice was in pieces. "You could have asked for anything." "I know," I said. "That's what makes it mine." I went home. For about 4 months, that was that. And I want to be clear that those 4 months were good. That's the part everyone forgets when they tell this story like a ballad. The good 4 months. We used the writ. We opened the Ridge Road. Refugees came properly now, in the open, with wagons, and the packs let them go because the packs were suddenly extremely interested in not annoying me. We built a second infirmary. We got a roof on the school. I turned 28, and my scent came in. It came in like weather. Slowly at first, the wall Bram had built cracking, over weeks, in a way that made me feverish and stupid and unbearable to live with. Then, all at once, Mira, 16 now and taller than me, put her head around the infirmary door one morning and said, "Elian, you smell like Kai," and burst into tears and could not explain, and went away embarrassed. Wolves started deferring to me in ways they hadn't, not out of respect, out of instinct. They'd stop mid-sentence when I walked in, like their bodies had gotten a message their brains hadn't received. I hated it. That's the thing nobody tells you about power. I'd spent my whole life being told my scent was nothing, and now it was everything, and everyone around me was slightly less free than they had been, and there was no way to give it back. And of course there was the other thing, an unbonded Omega with a scent like that, in a world with a great many unmated alphas in it. The proposals started in the 5th month, 21 of them. Kings, heirs, war leaders. A man old enough to be my grandfather sent me a deed to a valley. Somebody sent a horse. Somebody, and I still don't know who, sent a sword, which was at least aiming at the right target. Cassian sent nothing at all, and came in person and stood in my infirmary and said, "You know I'm going to ask." "I know. And you know what you're going to say." "Yes." He nodded. He looked at the floor for a while. "Say it anyway," he said. "I'd rather hear it from you than work it out from your face." "You're the best man I know," I said. "I'd have followed you into anything. I want you to understand that I know exactly what I'm turning down." But I'm still holding the other end of a thread," I said, "and you deserve better than a man who's holding somebody else's." Cassian Roth laughed, a real one, tired and rueful. "He doesn't deserve you. No, he genuinely, comprehensively does not deserve you, Elian, and if you go back to him, I will never let you hear the end of it." "I know." "Are you going back to him?" I didn't answer. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he did something kings never do. He bowed, properly, down at the waist, in my infirmary, among the drying herbs. "Then let him crawl for it," he said, "the whole way." And then it was winter, and the Ironcrest border collapsed. Rennick Hale, 6 border lords actually, but Hale led them, had spent 2 years watching a king come apart, and had done the arithmetic, and decided that a wolf who could not shift was a wolf who could not hold a war line. They came over the eastern valleys in the first week of the frost. The reports reached Thorn Hollow 8 days later, because we are far from everything, which is usually the point. Ironcrest was losing, not slowly, losing. 3 holdings gone in a fortnight, the eastern granaries burning, and the Alpha King out on the line every night personally, in a body that could not shift, being carried back at dawn. "He'll die out there," Wren wrote. "Elian, he is not stopping. He has not slept in 9 days. He's holding it with his body because he hasn't got anything else, and I am watching a man commit suicide by war, and I do not know what to do." And then, at the bottom, in different ink, like she'd fought with herself about it, "He won't ask you. He's forbidden anyone to send for you. He said you've been asked for enough. So I'm asking." Bram found me in the yard at midnight, saddling a horse. He didn't say anything for a while, just watched me get the girth wrong twice. "You're not medicine," he said at last. "I know. You go up there and set foot on Ironcrest ground, boy, and every wolf on that line is going to feel you coming. You know what you smell like now. You'll bring the whole Eastern Front to its knees, both sides. I stopped with my hands on the saddle. Yes, I said slowly. I will. We looked at each other. Oh, said Bram. Oh, you clever, vicious little. Get the wagons, I said. We came up the ridge road at dawn on the fourth day. 200 wolves from Thorn Hollow, half of them former Ironcrest, throwaways, exiles, rejected mates, wolves whose packs had written unfit beside their names. I hadn't ordered them. I told them where I was going and why, and I told them they owed Ironcrest nothing, and every single one of them was in the yard by morning. You realize, Wren said afterward, that they didn't come for Ironcrest. I know. They came for me. That's the part I still can't think about too long. The eastern line was 4 miles of burning valley. Hale's wolves had the high ground, and Ironcrest had a broken salient and about 900 exhausted defenders under a king, who was, when I got my first look at him through the smoke, being held up by 2 of his own guards. He'd been fighting for 11 days. I stopped my horse at the top of the rise, where both armies could see me, and I let go. Nobody has ever adequately described what it was like, and I couldn't, because I still can't smell myself. But 2,000 wolves stopped fighting. Hale's front line went down first, the whole line, together, like a wave breaking, then his second, then his reserves on the slope. Ironcrest went down where they stood, weapons falling out of hands, and I sat on a horse at the top of a burning valley and watched a war end because I breathed out. It took about 90 seconds. Then there was no sound in that valley at all, except the fires. I rode down through them. 2,000 wolves on their knees in mud and ash, and every head turning to follow me, and I have never in my life felt anything as obscene as that. I want to be very clear. For whatever record this becomes, it was obscene. Every one of those men had a mother. Every one of them had made a choice to be in that valley, right or wrong, and I took it away from all of them at once, because I was born to the right woman. That is not a gift. That is the thing they burned Silver Crown for, and standing in that valley, with my horse picking its way through a carpet of kneeling men, I understood the ones who lit the fire. I have never used it that way again. Not once. Not in all the years since. Ronan was on his knees, in the mud, at the center of the line, with his sword still in his hand, and he was the only wolf in that entire valley whose head was up. He looked at me coming. He was covered in other people's blood and some of his own. He'd taken a spear through the meat of the thigh 3 days before and had it packed and had gone back out. His eyes were sunk into his skull. And when I stopped in front of him, he said hoarse, cracked, absolutely wrecked, "You shouldn't have come. Shut up. They'll never fear me again." "They'll fear me," I said. "It's a fair trade. Give me your hand." "Elian, Ronan Vale," I said. "I have not slept in 4 days, and I have just ended a war with my lungs. And if you make me get down off this horse, I am going to be extremely unpleasant about it. Give me your hand." He gave me his hand. It was the first time we had touched properly, skin to skin, since I was 22 years old, and he had said 4 words in a circle. The bond went off like a struck match. I heard him make a sound. I probably made one too. Every wolf in that valley felt it. The reports afterward describe it as a sound, which it wasn't, or a light, which it definitely wasn't, and the closest anyone came was Hale himself, in his surrender, when he said, "It was like the ground remembered something." The scar in my chest, 5 years old, thick, badly healed, aching in every weather, didn't close. I want to be accurate. It didn't close, then, or ever, but it stopped screaming, and I sat on a horse in a burned valley holding the hand of the man who'd put it there, and I felt his pulse come up under my fingers like a drowning man breaking the surface, and I closed my eyes. "Don't," I said, "to nobody." "Elian," I said, "don't." My voice was shaking. "This isn't forgiveness. This is a tourniquet. Don't you dare mistake it. I won't. Say it." "It's a tourniquet," he said. "It's not forgiveness. Elian, I know. God, I know. I've known for 5 years." He was crying. He didn't seem to be aware of it. That was somehow the worst part. I stayed 9 days. I did not stay in his house. I stayed in the field infirmary with the wounded, both sides, because Hale's men were bleeding in the same mud, and I have never in my life been able to make my hands care whose flag a man was under. Ironcrest hated that. The Ironcrest Council hated that. Tagliavani came to see me on the second day about it, in the tent, with her sleeves rolled up and a genuinely useful pair of hands, and she stitched a man's shoulder beside me for 2 hours before she said a word. She was good at it. I'll give her that. She was good at everything. "You could have him back," she said at last, without looking up. "Yes. He'd give you the throne. He'd give you the pack. He'd give you anything you asked for, and he'd thank you for taking it." "I know. So, what are you waiting for?" I tied off a suture. "Do you love him?" I asked. Her hands stopped. "I have loved that man since I was 15, she said, in exactly the voice she'd have used to report a grain tariff. "I have run his territory for 2 years, while he was too broken to hold a pen. I have lied to the council for him. I have killed for him, twice, and I would do it again this afternoon. And he's never." She started stitching again. "He's a very honest man, in the worst possible way. He told me, once, that he was already ruined for anyone else. He said it kindly. Do you know what that's like?" "Yes," I said. "Actually, I do." She looked up, and for 1 second, 1 single second, the two of us saw each other very clearly. "I'm not going to be your enemy, Talia." "You will be," she said. "Not because you want to be, because I'm going to make you." She snipped a thread. "I have spent 2 years being the reason Ironcrest still exists," she said. "And the day you walk into that hall on his arm, I become a footnote. A capable woman who kept the chair warm." "That's not." "It is. And you know it is. And the fact that you're too decent to say so is the single most infuriating thing about you." She stood up and rolled her sleeves down and became, in about 2 seconds, the most polished political operator on the continent again. "For what it's worth, Elian, he doesn't deserve you, and I'd have made him a better consort, and I hope you're very happy." She got to the tent flap. "And if you hurt him," she said, "I'll bury you." I did rather like her. That's the tragedy of the whole business. Under different stars, would have been friends. He came to the infirmary on the 9th night. I was elbow deep in a debridement, and I didn't look up, and he stood in the doorway of that tent for 20 minutes without speaking while I worked, holding a lamp, because the boy holding the lamp had fallen asleep on his feet. The Alpha King of Ironcrest, holding a lamp. When it was done, and the man was breathing, and the tent was quiet, I washed my hands and said to the basin, "You're leaving me an army in 3 days. I'm leaving you the army, all of it. Ironcrest's standing force, at Thorn Hollow's disposal, permanently, under your seal. I don't want it. I know." His voice was very steady. "That's why you're getting it." I turned around. He looked better. 9 days of a bond that wasn't actively killing him. And he'd put on some of the weight, and his hands were steady on the lamp, and his eyes were gray again, instead of that terrible bruised color. He looked like a man again, instead of a wound, and I felt, standing there with wet hands in a field infirmary, the exact size and shape of what I wanted, and it was so enormous that it frightened me. "Ronan, I'm not asking," he said, immediately, fast, like he'd been holding it. "I want to be clear. I'm not asking. I'll never ask. You understand? Not once. It's not mine to ask for. That's very convenient." "What?" "That's very convenient," I said, and my voice was climbing and I let it. "Because if you never ask, then you never risk anything, do you? You just get to stand in doorways holding lamps and being tragic, and I get to be the one who decides, forever, and you get to be innocent of it." He stared at me. "You don't get to be innocent," I said. "You did this. You chose this. You stood up in front of 300 people and you called it mercy." "I know." "And I crawled, Ronan." "Did anyone tell you that? Did anyone ever tell you that I crawled off your land on my hands and knees in the rain because my body did not work anymore?" Silence. The lamp shook. "No," he said. "No one told me that." "Well," I said, "now you know." He set the lamp down. He set it down very carefully, on a crate, and then he went down on his knees on the floor of that tent, in the blood and the mud and the wet straw, and he put his forehead on the ground. "Get up." "No, Ronan." "Ask me why I did it," he said, into the floor. I stopped. "What? You never asked?" His voice was muffled. "Steady. 5 years. You've never once asked me why. You've told me what I did, and you were right about every word of it, and you've never asked me why, and I've never told you because I didn't think I was allowed to have a reason. You don't have a reason." "No," he agreed. "I don't. I have an explanation. They're different. May I give it to you?" I stood there in a field hospital with my heart going like a hammer. "Yes," I said. "When I was 19, he said. "My father presented a mate at the choosing. Not his fated one. His fated one died when I was 6. A second mate. A boy from the Eastern Holdings. No bloodline. 16 years old. And my father was 50, and he was besotted, and the pack said nothing, because he was the king. They killed him in the spring. I didn't move." "Not the pack," Ronan said. "The council, quietly. A weak consort is a lever, you see. You can't reach a king, but you can reach the soft thing he loves, and my father's council had 4 separate men who wanted his chair. They cut his throat in the orchard and put it about that he'd run. My father found out in the autumn, and he killed 6 of his own council with his hands, and then he walked into the northern woods in December and did not come back, and I was crowned at 22. The tent was very quiet. So, when I was 28, Ronan said, still on the floor, and the moon put a boy in front of me, at the choosing a boy with no bloodline, no pack, and a scent so thin the council would have him in the ground by spring. Don't. I did the only thing I could think of to keep you alive. Don't. I was shaking. Don't you dare. Don't you dare stand there, kneel there, and tell me you humiliated me to protect me. It didn't work, he said. He lifted his head. His face was destroyed. It didn't work, he said. That's the whole point. That's what I've been trying to tell you. It was a coward's plan, and it was stupid, and I have had 5 years to look at it from every angle, and there is no version of it where I'm anything other than a man who was too frightened to fight for you. So he threw you away and called it strategy. He didn't look away. I could have declared you before the whole council, he said. I could have put my body between you and every knife in Ironcrest and made them come through me. I could have taken you and gone north and been nothing and been happy. I had 1,000 roads, and I took the one where nobody could ever hurt you, he said. because I did it first, and I did it hardest, and there was nothing left of you worth killing. I sat down on a crate, because my legs had stopped being interested in the project. I'm not telling you this so you'll forgive me, he said. You shouldn't. It's not alien. It isn't better. It's worse. I want you to understand that I know it's worse. A man who does that out of cruelty is a monster, and you can hate him cleanly. A man who does it out of fear is just a coward, and you have to live in the world with cowards, and that's so much worse. He got up, slowly, off his knees. That's all, he said. That's the explanation. It's not a reason. There's no reason. He picked up the lamp. I'll leave the army, he said. It's yours. Everything's yours. It's been yours since I was 28 years old, and I've just been holding it badly. And he went out. I sat in that tent until the sun came up. Here's what I did with that information, which is, I think, the most important thing I have ever done. Nothing. For 6 months, I did nothing. I went home. I ran the hollow. I trained 4 new healers because my hands were getting slower, and there were 300 people who could not be allowed to depend on one man's hands. I turned 29. And I thought, because everyone was very keen to tell me what to feel, Cassian thought I should burn him. Ren thought I should forgive him. Bram thought I should stay in the hollow forever and never look north again. Talia Vane, I have no doubt, was praying nightly for a rock to fall on me. And I sat with it for 6 months, on my own, and I let it be complicated. That's the thing nobody teaches you. That you're allowed to let it be complicated for as long as you need. He wrote, once a week, for 6 months, without fail, and he never once asked me for anything. The eastern granaries are rebuilt. The children are back in the valley school. Talia has taken the eastern seat. She is better at this than I am, and everyone knows it. It rained for 9 days. Bram's tincture works. My hands have stopped shaking. I shifted today. It came when I called. It hasn't forgiven me either, but it came. I dreamed about the circle again. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. 26 letters. I have all of them. And then, in the spring, the Council of Pax convened at Greymere again, and every king on the continent came, and so did I, because Thornhollow had a seat now, and I had earned it in a burning valley. And on the second day, in front of 600 wolves, Ronan Vale walked to the center of the floor, in the snow of a late spring storm blowing in through the open doors, and got down on both knees. The hall came apart. Kings do not kneel. That's not a custom. It's a structure. It's the thing the whole world is stacked on top of. And the Alpha King of Ironcrest went down on the stones in front of 600 people and put both hands flat on the floor. Ronan, said Cassian, appalled, halfway out of his chair. Ronan, don't, Elian Marsh of Thornhollow, Ronan said. His voice carried. It always carried. That was the horror of it. The man had a king's voice, and he was using it for this. 7 years ago, I stood in a circle, and I rejected my fated mate in front of my pack. I said he was weak. I said he could not survive me. I said it was mercy. 600 wolves. Absolute silence. I was a coward, he said. That's the whole of it. There's no other word, and I've looked for one. I am asking him publicly, on my knees, in front of every wolf who watched me do it, because he was humiliated publicly, and I will not be forgiven privately. He stopped, breathed, went on. To release me from the rejection, to take it back, to let the moon put back what I broke. He put his forehead on the floor. "And I want it recorded," he said, into the stone, "that if he says no, that is just, that there is no wrong done to me in it, that I am not owed this, and I have never been owed this. And any wolf in this hall who thinks worse of him for refusing me may take it up with me outside at their convenience at length." The wind blew snow across the floor, and 600 wolves turned all together and looked at me. I stood up. I want you to understand how badly I wanted to run down those steps. My whole body wanted it. The bond in my chest was screaming like a kettle. Every cell of me, every animal inch, wanted to cross that floor and put my hands in his hair and say, "Yes, yes, get up. I never wanted anything else. I have never wanted anything else in my life." And I thought about a boy on his hands and knees in the rain on the ridge road. And I thought, he waited 5 years to ask. Let him wait a little longer. Let him know what it is. "No," I said. The hall made a sound like a building settling. "Not no forever," I said. "No now." I came down the steps. I walked out onto that floor in front of 600 wolves, and I stopped in front of the kneeling king of Ironcrest, and I did not touch him. "Get up," I said. "Elian, get up. I'm not going to talk down at you. I've been talked down at enough for one life." He got up. We stood there, face to face, in the snow blowing through the doors of Greymere. "You want me to take it back?" I said, quietly, and only for him. "You want the moon to put it back the way it was?" "Yes." "It won't." I put my hand flat on my own chest, over the scar. "It doesn't work like that, Ronan. There is no back. This doesn't close." "It didn't close in the valley when you took my hand, and it won't close if I take you tomorrow, and it won't close in 40 years. I will be a man who was thrown away for the rest of my life, and you will be the man who did it forever. There's no ceremony that undoes it. There's no kneeling that undoes it." He was very white. Then, "So the question isn't whether I forgive you," I said. "It's whether I want to build something on top of it, knowing it's under there, knowing it always will be." "And do you?" he said. "Want to?" And I said the truest thing I have ever said out loud. "I don't know yet. So here's what's going to happen," I said. "I'm going home, to my hollow, and my people, and my infirmary, and the life I built on my hands and knees out of nothing while you were up here being tragic in a large chair. And you're going to court me." He blinked. "I'm sorry?" "You heard me. 600 wolves heard me." "That was rather the point. You are going to court me, Ronan Vale, like a person, like a wolf, with no crown and no claim and no fate to hide behind. You're going to come down to the hollow, and you're going to be useful, and you're going to be told what to do by a 16-year-old girl with a splinted arm, and you're going to earn it one day at a time, for as long as it takes. And one day I'll tell you, or I won't." "How long?" he said. His voice barely worked. "As long as I want," I said. And Ronan Vale Alpha, King of Ironcrest, who had never in his life asked permission for anything, who had thrown me away in front of the world because he was too frightened to fight for me, smiled. God help me. It went right through me. It went through me like it did in the circle when I was 22, in my one good shirt. "Yes," he said. "He came in the autumn. He came with no guard, no banner, and one horse. And he stood at the gate of Thornhollow in the rain and asked, out loud, at the gate, like anyone else, for permission to enter. Mira, who was on the gate that week, and who was the least impressed person I have ever met, looked him up and down. 'You're the one who threw him away,' she said. Yes, said the Alpha King of Ironcrest. He's in the infirmary, she said. There's a boy with a crush injury, and we're short of hands. Can you hold a lamp? And Ronan Vale said, Yes, and he came in. He held the lamp for 6 hours. He didn't say a word. He didn't ask me a single question. When I told him to fetch water, he fetched water. When I told him to move, he moved. When Bram, who had known perfectly well who he was from the second he walked in and had said absolutely nothing, barked, Boy. The light. He adjusted the light. Nobody called him Alpha. Nobody called him King. Nobody called him anything at all, because Thorn Hollow's one rule is that we don't ask what you were before, and it has never once occurred to anyone here that the rule might work in that direction. At 2 a.m, the boy's fever broke. I sat back on my heels and wiped my face with my forearm, and I said, He'll keep. And Ronan Vale, who had not slept in 3 days and had ridden 140 miles, said, May I stay? There's a bunkhouse, I said. East of the mill. Ask for Halvard. The bunkhouse. You wanted to court me. I stood up and started washing my hands. You did not want to move in. I did not look at him. I have never been more aware of anything in my life than of not looking at him. Right, he said, and there was a note in his voice, a note, God help me, of something like laughter. He stayed 11 days. He mucked out the infirmary. He cut wood. He went up on the school roof in the rain with Halvard and hammered shingles for 2 days, and he was very bad at it. And Halvard, who had been thrown out of a border pack at 19 for the crime of being an alpha who could not fight, called him a useless great lump to his face on the second morning. I was watching from the yard when it happened. I saw Ronan's shoulders come up. I saw the king in him rise that flat, cold look, the look that had made 300 wolves nod along while he threw away his own mate. And I saw him put it down. He put it down in the rain on a roof and said, Yes, sorry, show me again. That was the moment I knew I was in real trouble. Wren visited in the second month and laughed at me for 4 consecutive days. He's shoveling, she wheezed. Elian, he's shoveling. That man commanded 900 wolves on a war line, and he is currently, as we speak, shoveling. Yes, thank you. And he is whistling. He is not whistling. He is whistling, Elian. Go and look. I did not go and look. He was whistling. Here's what the courtship actually looked like, since the ballads get it wrong. It was not roses. There was no gesture. He never once tried to give me a valley. It was, he learned every name in the hollow, all 311 of them. He learned who'd come from where, and he never asked, and he never had to, because people tell you things when you're on a roof with them for 2 days. He found out, in the 4th month, that 11 of the wolves in Thorn Hollow had been exiled from Ironcrest, his Ironcrest, his rulings, his signatures, and he went and sat with every one of them, alone, and let them say whatever they wanted to say to him. 2 of them hit him. He let them. One of them, a woman named Sinnett, who'd been thrown out with a 2-year-old for refusing a bonding, talked at him for 4 hours and then cried. And he sat there the whole time with his hands open on his knees and did not once defend himself. I know, because she told me. Everybody told me. That's the thing about a hollow this size. It is one enormous mouth. He's very good at this, Bram said darkly. In the 6th month, yes. That's what worries me. He's good at it. Man like that, boy, he's spent his whole life reading a room. What if he's just reading this one? I thought about that seriously. I thought about very little else. Then he's the best liar alive, I said. And I'll find out eventually, because you cannot fake being kind to a child at 4 a.m. when nobody's watching. Bram grunted. He held Mira's dog while it died, I said, in August. She wouldn't let anyone else, and he sat on the floor of the barn for 6 hours, and he didn't tell me. She told me. 3 weeks later. Bram was quiet a long time. Well, he said, hell, Talia Vane came in the 7th month. I'd been expecting her, in the way you expect weather. She rode into Thorn Hollow with an escort of 12 and a signed writ from the Ironcrest Council, and she stood in the middle of my yard in the mud, in a coat worth more than the school, and she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "The Council of Ironcrest requires its king." Ronan came out of the infirmary with his sleeves rolled up and blood on his forearms, someone's arm, someone's stitches, an ordinary Tuesday, and Talia looked at him for a very long moment. I watched her face. I watched her see him, unshaven, thin, filthy, entirely at ease, standing in a rogue hollow 4 days from anywhere, holding a rag, and I watched something in her break, very quietly. "Ronan," she said, "Talia, you've been gone 7 months. Yes. There's a war coming out of the east, and the Hale lands are stirring again, and the council has met 4 times about the succession, and you have been shoveling." "Yes," he said. "Come home," she said. "No, just that. No argument, no speech. Then abdicate," she said. The yard went very quiet. "Because you cannot do both, Ronan. You cannot be a king 4 days' ride from your throne with your hands in someone else's infirmary. It's not possible. Every day you stay here, another lord decides Ironcrest is a corpse worth carving." Her voice cracked just once, and she hammered it flat again. 12 men died in the eastern valleys last month. I signed the letters. I signed them. Because you weren't there. He flinched. I saw it land. It was meant to land. "So choose," she said. "Be a king or be a suitor. But do not stand in the mud and pretend the crown is still on your head while I hold it up with both hands. Here is the part I have never told anyone, including him." I nearly said it. I nearly stepped forward, in my own yard, in front of my own people, and said, "Go. Go and be a king. Don't ruin yourself for me. I'm not worth a territory." I got as far as opening my mouth, and Mira, 16 years old, insufferable, splinted arm long since healed, said, from the fence, without looking up from the tack she was mending, "He's already ruined a territory for you once. Might as well let him do it on purpose this time." Ronan laughed, out loud, in the mud, with his sleeves rolled up. "She's right," he said. And then he turned to Talia, and he said the thing that I think about more than any other thing he has ever said to me, and he did not say it to me at all. "I'll abdicate." The yard exploded. Talia's escort 12 Ironcrest wolves were shouting. Half my hollow was shouting. Bram said, "Oh, for God's sake," so loudly it carried over everything. "You can't," Talia said. She'd gone white. "Ronan, you can't. There's no heir. There's no named successor. The territory will come apart in a fortnight." "Not if you take it," he said. She stopped, as though he'd struck her. "You've run it for 3 years," he said. "You've run it better than I ever did." "No, don't argue. We both know it, and every wolf on that council knows it. You held Ironcrest together while I was a corpse walking around in a crown. The only thing you've been missing is the right, and I have that, and it's the only thing I've got that's worth anything, and I'd rather give it to you than have it rot on me. That's not how it is, if I say it is. It's the one privilege of the chair. I can name my successor. I'm naming you." Talia Vane stood in the mud of my yard with her mouth open. "You arrogant," she said. And then, horrifyingly, she started to cry. "You unbelievable. You cannot just... I have loved you for 20 years, Ronan, and you're going to hand me your kingdom like a tip." "I know," he said gently. "I know. It's not a kindness. It's a burden, and I'm putting it on you because you're the only one who can carry it, and because I am tired, Talia. And I have wanted to put it down for 11 years, and I have never once been able to say so out loud." She hit him, full closed fist, and Talia Vane can hit, and he took it and didn't move. "Fine," she said, through her teeth, with her knuckles split. "Fine, I'll take it, and I will do it better than you, and I will be sung about, and you will be a footnote, the king who abdicated for a rogue healer, and in 100 years no one will remember your name." "Good," said Ronan. She got back on her horse. She looked down at me for a long moment. "He's a fool," she said. "Yes. Do you know what he's worth?" "Yes," I said. "That's why I've made him spend 7 months proving it." And Talia Vane, Queen of Ironcrest, as of that afternoon, though she wouldn't be crowned for 4 more months, surprised me completely. She laughed. "You'll do," she said. "God help me. You'll do." He abdicated formally at the Winter Council. It took 9 minutes, which is an obscenely short time to end a dynasty, and afterward, 600 wolves watched Ronan Vale, former Alpha of Ironcrest, no title, no lands, no rank, walk out of Greymere with nothing but a horse and a bag. The council was in an uproar for a week. Cassian, who had come specifically to enjoy himself, drank an entire bottle of something in my rooms afterward and laughed until he had to sit down. "He gave it away," he wheezed. "Elian. He gave away Ironcrest. Do you know what I did to get my throne back? Do you know how many men I—" He stopped, wiped his eyes, and he just handed it over in 9 minutes to the woman who's been in love with him for 20 years and walked out into the snow like a milkman. "Yes, I hate him so much. I know." "He's magnificent," Cassian said, with total disgust. "I've never been so annoyed in my life. Here's what I have never been able to explain to anyone, and I have stopped trying. It didn't make me forgive him. That's the thing everyone expects. The grand gesture, the crown on the floor, and the ledger comes clean. It didn't. It couldn't. There was still a boy on his hands and knees in the rain, and no amount of abdicating fixes that, and any story that tells you it does is lying to you about how people work. What it did was different and smaller, and much more important. It made me believe him. He came back to the hollow in the deep of winter, with no title, and I met him at the gate. Snow coming down. My whole hollow watching from every window, because subtlety has never been a Thorn Hollow value. "You've nowhere to go," I said. "No. You've no rank, no lands, no pack, and no name worth anything. No, you're a rogue," I said. "Yes," said Ronan Vale. I looked at him for a long moment in the falling snow. "Well," I said, "we take those." He kissed me. There, at the gate, with 300 people watching and the snow coming down and my hands full of a lantern, I dropped. And I want to be honest. I had spent 7 years constructing an extremely dignified plan for this moment, and I abandoned every single piece of it in about a second and a half, and I fisted both hands in his coat and pulled him down. Somewhere behind us, Mira started cheering. Then everybody started cheering. It was undignified and loud and freezing, and I have never been happier in my life. We did not bond. Not then. Not for another 8 months. And everyone who has ever heard the story has asked me why. And I'll tell you, though it's nobody's business, because a mating bond is permanent, because I had already had one thing done to me permanently, in public, without my consent, at the age of 22, and because I had decided somewhere on that ridge road, crawling, in the rain, that nothing would ever again enter my body or my life without my saying, out loud, with my whole chest, yes. He never pushed. Not once. Not by a hair. He'd have waited forever. He told me so, once, half asleep, and then went scarlet about it in the morning. The heat came in the spring. My first true one, at 29 years old, because 11 years of Bram's poison and 5 years of a rejection scar had put it off my whole adult life, and now the wall was down, and my body had a great deal of catching up to do. I felt it coming 3 days out, so did every wolf in a 4-mile radius. Bram cleared the hollow. I mean that literally. He stood in the middle of the square and roared, and 300 wolves packed up and went to the north camp for a week, and the only ones left in Thorn Hollow were Bram, who's 80 and has seen everything and is entirely unmoved by any of it, and Wren, who came 4 days' ride specifically to sit on the other side of a door with a knife in case I changed my mind about anything, and Ronan, who I asked, out loud, in my own words, with my whole chest, I won't write about that week. Some things are yours. I'll say only this. On the 4th night, in the dark, with the whole world reduced to about 6 feet of it, he put his mouth against the place where my shoulder meets my neck and stopped, and waited, and waited. And I understood that he was going to wait there until he died, if I didn't say it, and that the not saying would be fine with him, and that he would never once mention it again. Yes, I said. The bond went in like a door closing in a house you thought was empty. Not a tearing, a fitting. The click of something machined to a tolerance, seating home. And the scar, the 5-year scar, the thick, ugly, badly healed thing behind my sternum that I had put my fist against 10,000 nights, did not close. I told you, it never closes. But something grew over it, and whatever grew over it was mine, and I had chosen it, awake, in my own house, in my own words, and it was the first thing in my entire life that no one had done to me. He wept. I'd like it recorded that he wept, and I didn't, and I have held that over him for 30 years. The East came for us that autumn. Of course it did. I'd have been disappointed if it hadn't. The world had spent 2 years watching an unbonded Omega with a scent that could stop a war refuse 21 proposals. And now that Omega was bonded permanently to a wolf with no title and no army, in a rogue hollow with a wooden gate, Rennick Hale had made his arithmetic once before and been wrong. This time he made it with help. 9 border lords, 1,400 wolves, and they didn't come for the hollow. They came for me. They want a breeding line, Cassian said flatly, spreading the map across my infirmary table. He'd ridden 4 days with 200 Northmore Lancers and no invitation whatsoever, and I have never in my life been so glad to see anyone. That's what this is. They've done the sums. Silver Crown blood, bonded, breeding 1 generation, and they'd hold something no army on this continent could stand against. They'd have to take him alive, said Ronan. His voice was very quiet. Everyone in the room shifted, because when Ronan Vale's voice goes quiet, the temperature drops. They will not, he said, be taking him alive. Stop it, I said. Elian. No. Look at me. I put both hands flat on the map. You are about to do the exact thing you did when I was 22. He went absolutely still. You are about to decide something about me, I said. For me, because you're frightened. You're about to pick up a knife and start cutting my choices off one at a time until I'm safe. That's your whole disease, Ronan, and I love you. And I am telling you now, in front of witnesses, do it again, and I will walk out of this hollow, and you will never find me. The silence was extraordinary. Cassian very quietly said, God, I like him. Ronan closed his eyes. He stood there for a full 10 seconds with his fists on the table breathing, and then he opened his eyes and said, You're right. I'm sorry. What do you want to do? And the whole room, Cassian, Bram, Halvard, Ren, Mira, 4 of my healers and 200 Northmore Lancers waiting in my yard, turned and looked at me. Right, I said. Good. Sit down, everyone. I have a horrible idea. Here was the horrible idea. They wanted me alive. That was the whole shape of it. Every calculation Hale had made, every risk he was taking, rested on the assumption that at the end of it, there would be a living Omega with silver crown blood in a room he controlled. 1,400 wolves, and every single one of them under orders not to harm a hair on my head. So, I said, I'll go to them. Ronan stood up so fast, the table moved. Sit down, Elian. I said sit down, and you promised. I didn't raise my voice. I have never had to raise my voice since the wall came down. It's one of the more disturbing things about me now. I'll go to them, alone, under parley. They won't touch me. They can't. They need me whole, and they need me compliant. And the one thing 1,400 men cannot do is put a knife to the thing they've come to buy. They'll take me into the center of their camp. And then I'll open my mouth. Nobody spoke. You did that once before, said Cassian slowly. In the valley, 2,000 wolves. Yes. And you said afterward that it was the single most obscene thing you'd ever done, and you'd never do it again. Yes, I said. Elian. They came from my home, I said. And there it was. 311 people. A school with a bad roof. An infirmary with a scrubbed pine table where an old man had once told a dying boy that he was difficult about his patients. Everything I built on my hands and knees out of nothing. While the world was busy being certain, I was worth nothing. They can have anything else, I said. They can have my blood and my name and my line and the whole rotten inheritance, and I'd hand it over this afternoon. But they came up my ridge road with 1,400 men to take 300 people who have nowhere else on this earth to go. I put my hands flat on the map. So yes, I said, I'll do the obscene thing, and I'll live with it. I've lived with worse. We did it on the 4th morning. I rode down alone in the fog, in a plain coat, unarmed. It took 40 minutes. Hale's outriders took me at the ford and were extremely polite about it, which was somehow worse. And they walked me through 1,400 men to the center of that camp. And every wolf in it turned to watch me pass, and I could feel the wanting come off them like heat off a stove. Rennick Hale was waiting in front of his tent. He was not a monster. That's the thing I want to say clearly. He was about 50, gray, tired-looking, with a farmer's hands, and he'd brought 1,400 men up a mountain because he had done a piece of arithmetic, and the arithmetic had a person in it. Master Marsh, he said, you've come to talk. No, I said, and I took the wall down. Everything. All of it. Not the trickle I let out in the infirmary, not the pressure I used on the ridge, not even the wave in the burning valley. Everything. 29 years of it. 11 years of poison and 5 years of a scar and 7 years of being the only one in the room, and a woman who walked out of a fire with her whole line dead behind her and put a slow death in her own veins so that her son could be small enough to live. All of it, at once, in the fog, in the middle of 1,400 armed men. They tell it different ways. The Northmore men on the ridge said the fog moved, all at once, like something breathing out. Hale's people, the ones who talk about it, and most of them won't say that for about 2 minutes, nobody in that camp could remember what they had come for. Not conceptually, literally. Men stood there holding weapons and could not, for the life of them, recall why. Bram, who was 2 miles away with his hands over his ears, said he wept for 4 minutes without knowing what about. And Ronan, my Ronan, on the ridge, with Cassian physically holding him down by both arms, said only this, afterward, and never said anything else about it, ever. I heard your mother. 1,400 wolves went down, and I walked through them in the fog to Rennick Hale, who was on his knees in front of his own tent with tears running down his tired face and his farmer's hands open on his thighs. And I crouched down in front of him. Look at me, I said. He looked. You came up my road, I said, to take 300 people who have nothing, and put a collar on me, and breed a weapon out of my body. Yes, he said. He was weeping. He couldn't stop. Yes, God forgive me. Yes, get up, I said, and go home, and take your men, and tell everyone, Rennick, every lord and every king and every council on this continent, exactly what happened here this morning. Tell them I could have killed you all, I said. Tell them it would have been easy. Tell them I have thought about it since, and that I think about it still. And tell them that I let you go, because I want them to be afraid of me, I said. And I want them to know precisely why they don't have to be. They went home, all 1,400. Down the ridge road in the fog, and Rennick Hale sent me his sword in the spring, which I gave to Mira, who uses it to prop a window open in the schoolhouse, and which is, I think, the single best thing that has ever happened to that sword. Nobody has come up the ridge road since. Nobody, in 30 years, has come up the ridge road since. We were married in the summer. Not bonded, that had been done, in the dark, in my own words, and it was mine and nobody else's. Married in front of everyone, which is a different thing, and is for everyone, and which I insisted on precisely because I had once been rejected in front of everyone, and I wanted the ledger balanced in the same currency. 600 people came. Cassian gave me away, and cried, and denied it furiously for the rest of his life. Ren stood up and gave a speech that began, I have known Elian Marsh since he was 6 years old, and he has never once let anyone help him with anything. And I would like to thank Ronan for finally lowering himself sufficiently to be allowed. And it went downhill from there and got a standing ovation. Talia Vane came, Queen of Ironcrest in her crown, with her own consort on her arm, a quiet beta scholar who adored her, and whom she adored, and who I am told makes her laugh, which is more than Ronan ever managed. She kissed my cheek at the door and said, You know, I still think he's a fool. He is, I said. Yes, she said, and looked across the hall at him. But he's your fool now, and I've got a kingdom, so on balance, I think I did rather well out of it. And Bram stood up at the end, 81 years old, and furious about it, and raised his cup and said, 29 years ago, a woman came out of the woods and made me put poison in a 3-day-old baby to keep him alive. And I've hated myself every day since. And tonight, I have watched him choose freely and out loud and in front of all of you the exact life he wanted. And I want to say to that woman, wherever she is, he's shone anyway. And nobody burned him. There's no more plot after that, really. That's the trouble with a happy ending. It's got no shape. It's just years. We had a great many of them. Ronan Vale never held a title again. He was, for the last 31 years of his life, the rogue healer's husband, which is how he introduced himself, always with a straight face in front of kings. He ran the school, badly at first, then rather well. He got the roof fixed properly in the end, and he was insufferable about it for a decade. He shifted every full moon. The wolf came when he called. It took about 4 years before it stopped flinching when he reached for it, and I sat up with him for every single one of those nights, and he never once asked me to. Mira runs the infirmary now. She's 42, terrifying, and better at it than I ever was. She trained under Bram and under me, and under nobody's opinion but her own. She has never let Ronan forget, for one single day of his life, that he threw me away. She brings it up at birthdays. He loves her more than he has ever loved anything except me, and I have never told either of them that I know it, and I never will. Bram died at 89 in his sleep, in the room off the infirmary, and we buried him under the ridge with a view of the road. He left me his instruments and a letter. The letter said, in its entirety, difficult about my patients, always was. B. I never found out my mother's name. I looked. God, I looked 30 years of it, every archive, every burned roll, every old wolf in the north who might have been alive when Silver Crown fell. Nothing. She walked out of a fire and put poison in her own blood and carried me 40 miles through a winter that killed 40 grown wolves and died at 26 with a 3-day-old baby in her arms and a lie on her lips to keep him breathing. And I do not know what to call her, so I put a stone up on the ridge anyway, next to Bram, and I had them carve on it. She came out of the woods. She did not say her name. Her son lived. That's all of it. That's everything I know. It's enough. Ronan asked me once. Near the end, he was 71 and had the cough that would take him in the spring, and he was propped up in our bed with the window open because he wanted to hear the yard. He said, "Do you ever think about it? The circle, every day?" He was quiet. "I'm sorry," he said, for the 10,000th time. In 31 years, he never once stopped saying it, and he never once used it to ask for anything. "I know," I said. "If I could go back..." "Don't." I took his hand. It was very light. "Don't do that. That's the one thing I've never let you do, and I'm not starting now. If you went back and did it right," I said, "we'd have been bonded at 22. And I'd have been a king's consort in a fine house, and I would never have crawled off your land, and I would never have met Bram, and I would never have set Mira's arm, and there'd be no hollow, and there'd be 300 people dead in ditches across 4 territories who are instead, at this moment, in my yard. And I'd have gone my whole life," I said, "believing what your healers wrote on my file when I was 14. So no, I don't want to go back. You broke me," I said, "and I want you to carry that, and I have made you carry it every day for 31 years, and I'd do it again. And I built something out of the pieces that is mine, and you didn't give it to me, and no one gave it to me. And then you came down the ridge road with no crown, and you asked at the gate like anybody else, and you held a lamp for 6 hours. That's the story, both halves. I won't have one without the other." He was crying. Of course he was. He cried at everything by then. He'd cried at a fence post in his 60s and never lived it down. "I don't deserve..." "No," I agreed. "You don't. Nobody does. That's not what any of this is for." I lay down beside him and put my head on his shoulder, And outside in the yard, somebody was shouting about the schoolhouse roof again, because it always comes back to the schoolhouse roof. Ronan. I never took it back, I said. The rejection. I never released you from it. Do you know that? All these years, I never said the words. He laughed. It hurt him. I felt it. I know, he said. You never asked. No, he said. You told me to wait. He turned his head and put his mouth against my hair. So I waited, he said. That's all. That's all it ever was, Eliane. I waited and you let me stay. And I have never in my life been given anything better than that. He died in the spring, with the window open. I sat with him. The wolf came out one last time, an hour before the end old, gray around the muzzle, blind in one eye, and it put its enormous head in my lap, the way it had once on a stone floor in a hall full of kings. And it did not cry that time. It just breathed, and I put my hands in its fur, and I said, Good. Yes, good. I've got you. And I held on until it stopped. I'm 82. Mira runs the infirmary. Halvar's granddaughter runs the school, and the roof is fine, and I like that noted. Thornhollow is 4,000 people now, and has a seat on the Council of Pax that no king on this continent would dare question, and the writ hangs in the hall in a frame, signed by 4 kings, one of whom signed it twice because his hand was shaking. I go up the ridge most evenings, when my knees allow, and sit between the 2 stones, the one that says she came out of the woods, and the one that says nothing at all except a name, because he was very clear about that. At the end, just the name, Ronan. No title. He was extremely firm, and sometimes, sitting up there, I think about a boy in his one good shirt, standing in the back of a circle where he hoped very much to be overlooked. And I want to reach through 50 years and take him by the shoulders and tell him, You are not weak. You will be told it, publicly, at volume, by a man who loves you, and he will be wrong, and he will spend 31 years finding out how wrong, and he will die still finding out. You will crawl, and then you will get up. And everything, every single thing you become, will be something you built with your own hands, out of exactly nothing, and no one will ever be able to take it off you, because no one ever gave it to you. Hold on, and get up, and go north when the rain stops. The old man on the other end is difficult about his patience.